Got it done?
I'm taking some pictures, and to see all the people here involved in this thing, doing what they're doing, and it's just amazing to me. This thing has grown into something that I just could never believe possible. I met Larry Phelan for the first time.
Spent some time up on the top deck here, up in front, watching the air bubbles come up from the divers, because it's hard for you and I to picture exactly what's down there, and to see the bubbles come up, and I could see that a diver was here, and a diver was there, and a diver was over here, and trying to imagine the size of the tower, and how it rested on the bottom. And I was dumbfounded by how far these divers were apart from each other, doing their exploration. And I can imagine just the catastrophe when it happened, how violent that must have been with this huge structure, hitting the surface. Not like a ship sinking, which is probably fairly quiet, but this thing collapsing into the ocean must have been terrifying.
That night that the tower went down, imagine that night. My father was a repairman on the towers. We knew it was a tough job, especially around middle of January. But now coming out here and lying in my berth, it was pretty rough last night. And the waves were slapping against the bottom of the boat, and you couldn't help think about what it was like that night for them before the storm knocked it down. It was an eerie feeling. This boat can go back. That was a fixed item there, and the only thing that could do would go down. And I think everybody thought of that last night at some point in time. Certainly I did. I'm sure Larry did. It must have been terrible.
Where we are, we're swimming along the main flight deck. To the left would be the officers' administration office, and we're just looking around. That's at about 146 feet.
But you're just off of the flight deck, so there's
Yes.
still a lot of tower below you.
Yes, there's 2 decks below us.
Coming back to the cabin and looking at the films is just exhilarating. And then, of course, being on the ship or the boat and standing here and looking out at the bubbles and the divers and getting a perspective for how large the tower is looking at, there's no land in sight. It's the thought of what was going on out here while the men were serving on the tower. Just everything is dumbfounding. But the last 2 days have been extremely emotional. I've tried to get off and have my quiet times by myself. Being up here on the bow, just imagining what the divers are looking at, and I would love to be down there doing that. To see things that only a few people have seen.
Gives you the urge to learn how to dive.
You start to get an idea, perspective of how huge that leg is. Coming back with the sons of 2 of the people that were lost on the tower makes it a very emotional trip, certainly for them, but certainly for me, because I've felt that I've in a way known their fathers. I've visited their fathers' graves, and for these guys to be able to come back and be there, I feel like I want to help them. I want to make their visit to their dad's gravesite as comfortable as possible.
This is one of those shooting moments where everybody sort of gets into the action. Here's the vessel, here's the anchor, and a scheme whereby we would feed cable and have an HMI, 1200 watt HMI to take inside.
When the tower originally went down, it ended up almost 200 or nearly 200 yards away from its original position, laying on its side. Over the years, it has basically stayed in that position up until about 2 years ago, when finally part of the welds and the floor literally just rusted away, and the large supporting A-leg, which used to hold the tower up, finally punched through like a fist through plasterboard, and the tower structure itself slid down that leg. You now have to deal with a lot of real deep stuff.
All right, let's do it.
Ready?
Texas Tower was not a ship. Even though it is classified as a shipwreck, it was never designed or built for watertight integrity, airtight integrity. For all intents and purposes, it's a building that they put out on stilts out in the middle of the ocean. The tower was never built to be in the ocean. It was built to be almost 7 stories above the surface of the ocean. All the doors were regular handled doors. There were no dogged hatches. There were no watertight compartments. It was built like a metal building. So it was susceptible. It would be very susceptible to twisting and tearing and structural deficiencies.
A tragic accident is something that you just, you can't prepare for it. It just hammers you real hard, and then you begin asking questions. Why did this happen? It didn't have to happen. You start second guessing everybody that's supposed to be, on top of things, and you question authority. It's hard to comprehend the complete picture of the tower in the shape it's in now. It looks like a giant grave to me. I know there were no bodies on board, but still, it's the last place those men had their feet on the ground.
I can't use it.
They'll be hanging on a little nail right inside.
Yeah, right next to it.
They'd probably replace it if you sent it in. Some of the guys brought back some dinner plates and a few cups and things like that. And they shared those things with the relative, the sons. I thought it was a nice gesture. And I do believe this, that the Texas Tower in time will sort of disappear. Again, a sort of a rust stain on the seafloor. So to have perhaps some of the personal effects or some of those things that might have been used by relatives or fathers to take back for those that paid such a terrific price, I think is not unreasonable.